Welcome to the Business Bravery podcast, inspiring stories from coaches and course creators to help you do the next brave thing in your business. Coming up on the Business Bravery podcast.
I worked for a photographer who had millions of followers. This was back in 2014. And I got to meet him, and I was actually working on his social media for one of his online education products, and it was a photography membership. It was awesome. I traveled down to Sydney, met him in person, and it's so funny. I'm like, I'm helping out with your social media, but I was so shy, I couldn't say a word. And I kind of had to sort of get up the gumption and sort of say, look, I know it's weird that I'm not super talkative, but when I'm at a keyboard, I am the most social person you can imagine, and building a community online is something I love doing. And he was like, no, Tiff, it's all right, actually. And did you know I'm an introvert? And I was like, what? That blew my mind. And that just then created this seed of possibility for me. I'm your host, Tiffany Gilleland, an Australian business and launch coach with 10 years experience in online marketing and the creator of the Brave Launch Framework. I help coaches like you to be brave so you can stop dreaming and start doing that next big brave step and finally make more impact and get more clients. From speaking on camera to selling to launching, my approach to bravery helps you take bigger leaps without the mindset spirals. It's the secret ingredient to bigger results. Today, I'm sharing the behind the scenes of my own attempt at the Business Bravery Challenge before I teach it to you this week. I like to teach from my experience rather than theory, especially as that can make it more valuable in the teaching. This week, I ran through the 5 Days of Bravery, set a goal to create relationships with strangers online, dealt with negative thoughts, beliefs, blocks, and anxiety. This is a slightly messy account of doing something brave in my business as I work outside my comfort zone. While building relationships isn't new for me, sharing my results online is, and that pressure was a trigger for anxiety and stress and a little mindset spiral. Stay tuned to hear all about my results, discoveries, and how you can join us in the challenge. If you are wanting to take action on building relationships with strangers online and want to do it as part of a connected community, then follow along with the Business Bravery Challenge starting July 31, 8 p.m. US Eastern Time on Instagram at Tiffany G Studios. That's also August 1st, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. More details on this in the episode. Now, who's ready for some business bravery inspiration? Let's dive in. Okay, hello there everyone. It is me again with the much anticipated, yet probably not even requested follow-up to last week's episode about creating clients through relationships. And in this episode, I'm actually sharing the reality of me working through my own bravery challenge. So if you haven't caught last week's episode about creating clients through building relationships in a way that's not icky and all of that stuff, then definitely check it out. Although if you're too lazy, then stay here. Totally get it. But if you're enjoying this episode, it might be worthwhile to check it out as well, just for a bit more context of my own story with these are the processes and processes. This is what I do to build a connected community that has helped me to create friends, to fill up podcast guest spots for the whole year of 2023 already, to, get referrals, get clients, just build a connected community. One of our amazing podcast guests, Maggie from Maggie Lynn Coaching, she talks about at the beginning of her podcast about how it takes, people talk about it takes a village to raise a child, and she believes it takes a village to build a successful business. And this is that kind of stuff in action. You can check out her episode. I forget which number it is. Didn't know I was going to talk about this, but it is back a few episodes. And something else, another episode I had with one of my amazing guests, with Tracy Raftel, she talked about how that this whole, reaching out to people and creating relationships was a struggle for her. And she has a successful 6-figure business. She has built a previous multi-6-figure business, I think. I can't remember, did it make it to 7? I'm not sure. She was the one where she had all of her sales calls booked out. She was overrun with them and then had to get through the anxiety by like being in the bathtub and going, can I just cancel them all? And so, yeah, I just think this is just really useful, because before I got into doing this stuff with creating relationships with people online, I was using Facebook ads to find people for my various events and things like that. And to some extent that worked. I had a 5-figure launch. It was successful. Some of those people I'm still working with 3 years later, which is awesome. I've obviously been running my service-based business for a lot longer than doing this other stuff. And I have been working with people, but that was one of my first successful launches. And the thing about the Facebook ads is it just doesn't always create that relationship quite as easily, especially in these earlier days. And from my perspective, I tried everything to get out of having to do this kind of stuff and having to build relationships, because like at different points in time, it was easier to not have to deal with the stress, the anxiety, the self-doubt. I've been talking to you guys so much about my self-doubt challenges throughout my life. I didn't even realize how much it was holding me back, and the kinds of decisions it would make me make, the kinds of decisions that I would probably make on autopilot just from having this whole, oh yeah, but that's all right for other people. They're good at dealing with people. I'm not good at dealing with people. And just for anybody who needs any kind of insight into this, if you find yourself saying the words I am not, just consider that a red flag and a warning. Because not everything you think is true. And especially like if you look at my whole, I don't want to say journey, it's so cliched, but my life trajectory, there we go, not journey, my life trajectory, how I thought I was a behind the scenes person. I thought that's how my life was going to be. And I thought I was comfortable with that, and being a support person and helping other people to rise, and that I could never be the front facing person because I didn't enjoy having everybody looking at me. I certainly didn't want to be judged and criticized. I was doing enough of that in my own mind, let alone putting myself out into the world for other people to direct their negativity towards me, which, judging by the amount of negativity in my own brain, I thought there was going to be tons of it. So, and that's not how it has worked in reality, which is good, right? And also maybe not so good, because maybe people aren't even paying as much attention as I thought they would. So funny. And this is not in my notes, but I just feel like this stuff is it's coming up for a reason, and I'm just going to roll with it, because this is what the challenge that I've been doing is about kind of navigating all of this stuff. And when you look at my trajectory and how I thought things were going to be one way in my life, and then I worked for a photographer who had millions of followers. This was back in 2014. And I got to meet him, and I was actually working on his social media and for one of his products, for one of his online education products. And it was a photography membership. It was awesome. And it was amazing. And then I met him in person. I traveled down to Sydney, met him in person, and it's so funny. I'm like, I'm helping out with your social media, but I was so shy, I couldn't say a word. And then And I kind of had to sort of get up the gumption and sort of say, look, I know it's weird that I'm not super talkative, but when I'm at a keyboard, I am the most social person you can imagine, and building a community online is something I love doing. And he was like, no, Tiff, it's all right, actually. And I mean, he had an American accent. I can't do I mean, I could do the American accent, but I can't do his American accent. So yeah, but he was just like, it's all right. And actually, did you know I'm an introvert? And I was like, what? This guy, this is in 2014, before it was kind of cool, before we even really had terminology like influencer and stuff like that so much. And he had millions of followers across all these different social media platforms. And yeah, it just that blew my mind. And that just then created this seed of possibility for me, because trying to be a behind the scenes person wasn't overly working for me. It wasn't overly enjoying it in a lot of ways, and just really like to be the person making the decisions. Although I say that in a way where I can't wait until the day I have a team, and I'm growing a team of people who are smarter than me, who I get to listen to, take on their advice, and make the decisions, and together as a team. And yeah, I just found in some situations that that didn't work so well for me. So yeah, I'm not a great employee. I am definitely an entrepreneur. So anyway, just those seeds is what led me to where I am today with all of this stuff, which is actually not just relying on Facebook ads to find people for me, because I don't even think it builds the kind of connection that I'm seeking necessarily. And I just, yeah, now myself, and I have a team member who assists me with this stuff. She is better at this stuff than I am. And it does help to take some of the sting of rejection off my shoulders. Although I'm coaching her through the stings of rejection that she sees because she's on the front line. But it's just being able to build relationships, reach out to people in the real world, in the online world, through to the real world. And yeah, just doing that in a way where I don't feel like I'm this cold DMing salesperson, icky salesperson, person. Let's see how many times I can put person into a sentence. I am a person. Oh, guys, just so you know, I'm recording this. It is a Friday. I do have this dot point outline, but the idea of this is for me to share what happened with the challenge, because I ran through my 5-day challenge this week to test it out, to work out the kinks, and just so that then when I'm teaching everybody next week, it's really grounded in here's the reality, not just here's the theory, here's what you should do, and it's the same as what everybody's going through. I have concrete examples of what I do, how I tailor it to me, the things I had to work through, and really working through those blocks. And I know I have been recording for some time already and haven't even told you the point of what you're going to be hearing. But the point is that it did not go smoothly for me this week, even though I do a lot of this stuff myself and quite enjoy it. I have, in the last couple of months, had somebody on my team who helps me do the initial interaction stuff. So I haven't done it for a while. So there was kind of that stress of having to do that again and facing that fear and rejection. There was also the stress of the fact that I was sharing my results online and really just kind of getting into a place where it's like, hey guys, I'm going to show you how to make genuine connections with people, with strangers, and turn strangers into clients. And sort of there's kind of this, I think the right term is cognitive dissonance, or there's kind of this push-pull effect. And it's like, hey, I'm creating genuine connections, but I'm also sharing about it online. Does that make them not as genuine? Because I'm like, in one way you could view it as like, oh, I'm making these connections because I'm doing this challenge in order to help inspire people to take action. But also part of why I'm doing the challenge is to potentially get clients in the future. And so there was some of this, and also that whole everybody's eyes on me. So this is a thing that I have to work through every time I do launches and challenges and things like that. There is this, just like concrete in the pit of my stomach sometimes at the idea of people looking at me and judging me. And even though I have worked through so much of it, still when I go to do this kind of stuff, I have that in the pit of my stomach. And I was actually listening to a podcast this week. It's called The Perfectionism Project. It is a podcast that has completely changed my life. It is phenomenal. I really want to have her as a guest on my podcast one day. She is a fellow Australian entrepreneur. She runs this membership helping perfectionists get shit done. She shared a coaching call from inside her membership, and one of the members was talking about how she's trying to do these things that are outside of her comfort zone, but she's just like terrified. And part of what they worked through in the coaching call was how it becomes this learned response of being addicted to being like terrified and panicked when you're working outside of your comfort zone. And I realized like that's a whole big bunch of what I work through, what inspires me to do the work that I do, and especially with my clients. And it's a real huge part that has inspired the whole Business Bravery concept, the podcast, everything behind it. Because since I created this podcast, it's really created this sort of more memorable brand and things for people to remember me by. And it has attracted people who are interested in doing brave things and who just really enjoy that vision. And in a lot of cases, it's definitely attracted people to be on the podcast. It's certainly attracted people to perhaps be, inspired by the podcast. And in some cases, and it's always going to be fewer cases, although I should stop putting that out there, but and for some people it is starting to be, hey, I'd like to work with you. However, I need to be doing the brave things myself, which I have been doing. And yeah, I have gone off on a tangent. I've forgotten the plan. Just for anybody listening, I do have a bunch of dot points and I'm not sticking to them. And this is just chaos, and I'm going to keep it anyway, because I don't know, sometimes you need the imperfection, especially as I'm mining into the stuff that I have. I'm going to be talking to you about what I did on each of the days of the challenge as I did it, and how that relates to what I'll be teaching next week, just because I'm going to be going into more of the theory. Obviously, I didn't need to teach myself the theory, although maybe I should have. So how that got off track, I was talking about how I had that kind of, I just had so much extra fear than I was expecting, and how, I was listening to a podcast about being addicted to that fear and the terror and the panic, right? Because it just definitely feels like that. Like it really feels like I was getting up at the beginning of the day and being like, yeah, I've got to work on the challenge, but everything in me was tight. It's like walking through mud, and it just really felt like some kind of, saber-toothed tiger or something was going to bust out of my computer screen or my phone screen, depending on where I was doing this work. And the work and the challenge that I was doing was just connecting with people through DMs on Instagram. The challenge, of course, that I'll be running people through, it's you can decide to do it that way, or you could do it in Facebook groups, or you could do it in networking groups, whatever works for you. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. So don't feel like you have to do the DMing, but it is all about connecting with strangers online, and not necessarily having to DM all that many people and that kind of thing, but just, building those connections in a real genuine way. It was the plan. And it did happen. It was just, I was kind of surprised by all of the extra fear and stuff that I was working through. Like, oh man. Anyway, so this is what you're up for in today's episode. Complete imperfect action as I try and record this and document this and let you guys know. For those of you, I mean, I know a number of you are downloading the podcast. I assume you're listening. And not everybody wants to come over and, interact on Instagram. I do that all the time, where there's a number of people, it's like, oh yeah, I know you're on Instagram and everything, but I just really like your podcast. And if you can, if that's where you're at, I completely understand. So that's why I wanted to do this. Another way of doing this is perhaps a bit of like self-coaching, self-therapy, something like that, as I work through some of this stuff. So, wow. Okay, so what I did on each of the days of the challenge. Okay, so we have 5 days. The idea is to create more connections, genuine connections with other coaches, those are the people who I like to work with and who tend to hire me, are other coaches. Of course, if there's any service-based people out there and whatnot, you are always happy, welcome to get in touch. I have obviously been running my service-based side of my business for well over 10 years. So yeah, can definitely help you. It's just the coaches who I just quite really enjoy and I get inspired by and that kind of thing. So day one is all about like goal setting for success. And when I talk about goals, I just want to straight up say this has nothing to do with SMART goals. Okay, I freaking hate that acronym and it is not my jam. It does not light me up. I am definitely not inspired by it being a SMART goal. I just want to punch it in the face. To me, I just that's not how I work. Although I guess if you pull apart some of what I do, it may line up with that thing. What is it? Specific, measurable, something, time focused. I've missed a couple of letters. Oh. I am not teaching you SMART goals. That's not my thing. I don't enjoy it. And yet I keep achieving things. So I'm doing something that works for me. And that's the fun part of this. So with the goal setting for day one, I like to start with clearing the mind, because you can bet that on day one, when I woke up, I had a whole bunch of thoughts and fears that were completely just on my mind. And all I wanted to do was run away. And why did I tell people I was going to do this? And, I could probably still not post and nobody would care. That's a real thing that I'm going to be talking about a bit later, about the whole nobody cares thing that really derails me. So yeah, goal setting for success. And so that is partly setting goals, but actually it's about having a clear vision and working through objections ahead of time. So, and when I talk about a clear vision, it's actually doing visualization ahead of time. So that's part of what I'll be doing and what I'll be teaching. I'm going to be teaching this live on Instagram. I'm going to be starting July 31 at 8 p.m. US Eastern Time, which aligns with August 1st at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And I'll be, teaching more of this stuff and working through it in that way. However, if you just want to listen to the podcast, I'm sure you'll definitely get an idea about how all of this works. It just may not be through me working through the whole thing, just because that would create a very, very long podcast. But when it comes to goal setting, the first thing that I like to do is clear the mind. And I started with a 5-minute meditation. I have become addicted to the app called Insight Timer. And that app is just phenomenal. I'm using the free version. There's a 5-minute there's a 5-minute meditation that's run by an Australian guy who looks like the Australian version of Ed Begley Jr. back in the 80s. Right. And yeah, but it really works for me. And I don't have a long successful history with meditation, but being able to do these 5-minute meditations, it just clears the mind. And the other part that I do is sit down and just write out all my thoughts in a journal, just all of the craziness, all of the things of it's not going to work, nobody cares, we shouldn't be doing this, and there's other things I could be doing, and all that sort of stuff. Just get that out, empty the mind. And then I move into step 2, which is future journaling, right? Whenever I'm doing something like this is kind of a new technique that I picked up recently. So many of my techniques are newer techniques, actually. I've made so much progress in the last couple of months. It is phenomenal from my perspective. And yet there's still a voice. It's like, it's not enough. No. We're not going there, people. So I like to do future journaling for things like this. Okay. And I do this a lot, especially when like a call with a client comes up or a potential client or something like that. I like to sit down and journal as if it just happened, and journal it as if it just happened in my ideal world and my ideal experience. So it's like, oh, I'm so glad that I am at the end of I pictured myself on Friday, on today, and just being like, oh, I am so glad that I'm at the end of this. I've made so many connections. I'm so excited. Everything is going so well. And yeah, everything went well. And yeah, it's pretty good actually for me on Friday. I am like 90% there. So yeah, definitely awesome. The only reason that I'm not 100% there is just because, and I'll get into this when I get into those days, is just, yeah, not allowing for changes in energy, and yeah, not being where I wanted to be at the time of recording this podcast. So yeah, anyway, I'll talk to you about a bit more about that in a little while. But yeah, here we are. So we sit down, we do the future journaling. Oh man, I'm so happy and grateful that I did this and all of that stuff. And sometimes that future journaling can really lead into some ways of how I went about it. So it's sort of like really just tapping into that future version of yourself that did really well through the thing that you were stressed about. I find it amazing how much this reduces my anxiety about things and about how I have to do them right in order to get the right things, and helps me relinquish control. I was recording a podcast episode last night actually with the amazing Sarah Studman, and she was talking a lot about surrendering, which is definitely something I'm still working on. Right? Just because so much of how business was taught to me was taught in a very masculine way, which doesn't really lend well to surrendering. So yeah, that definitely helps me. And then from there, it's about creating the goals themselves, creating a detailed plan, and then visualizing myself working through the detailed plan. So for the goals, I have learned this new thing just recently about setting goals where it's like, oh, it's not just 5 people every day, although that maybe wouldn't be so bad. What I did was I set goals for, okay, so on day 2, I'm going to contact 5 people, 5 new people. On day 3, it's going to be 10 new people. Then the next day will be 15 new people. And then on Friday will be 20 new people. So that is how that worked. And I kind of like that staggered approach. And I heard about this as a staggered approach to working out your income. So in quarter 1, it's like, okay, if you want a 6-figure year, in quarter 1, we go for 10,000. In quarter 2, we go for 20,000. Quarter 3, we go for 30,000. And then quarter 4, 40,000. 40, 70. Yeah, I think that works, right? Yeah. So I kind of like that approach, although I may be adjusting it for myself and my own energy levels. So yeah, I'll talk a bit about that. But once I have the goal, then I come up with the detailed plan. And that's like, okay, so at 10:30 every day, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to start with a meditation. I'm going to do my journaling to kind of get me prepared. And then, after that 10 to 15 minute block, I'm going to get into doing the work. And I even like write out, hey, at 10:30, I'm going to do this and that, and then I'm going to do this. And having those very small steps planned out really helps me to take action. When I'm feeling overwhelmed about a task or something, that's when I really need to sit down, just break it down into the smallest steps possible. So it just makes it just easier for my brain to take action and not get caught up in that overwhelm. And yeah, so the other thing as part of the visualization that I do is like, okay, here's how I'm going to feel while I'm doing that task. So yeah, that is kind of interesting. Like choosing how you're going to feel ahead of time is so, so valuable for doing things outside of your comfort zone, especially things like this, where you're taking a brave leap and it's doing something that I think triggers some kind of response from childhood of handling these kinds of situations. Okay, like some might call it a trauma response. I'm not sure. I don't get into the trauma work. I'm still working on that. I don't like to mess with people's trauma so much, but it is having these tools that can help people move through this. The next thing that I like to do, and I know for the goal setting, it's like, oh, this is a lot of time. Pretty much day one is just around the goal setting and creating like a plan that's going to work. And then day 2 to day 4, that's when we're taking real world actions outside of our brain and interacting with other people. So the next thing that we do is then we go into journaling out the objections, because the brain is like, so it's fun to be like, oh, I'm going to plan this out. Planner Tiff and actual real life doing Tiff are two very different Tiffany's. I've said that a few times on this podcast. And it is understanding that, because when we plan with the prefrontal cortex, and that is a different part of the brain to when you're actually doing it. And when you're in the, okay, I'm going to do it now, then we're in more of the monkey mind type stuff. And it becomes this learned behavior sometimes of maybe not doing what we'd planned just because the monkey mind wants to avoid pain, seek pleasure, make things easier, be chilled out and relaxed. My monkey mind certainly loves YouTube, let me tell you, right? So gotta love that. So this is why we sit down with the journal and we work through the objections ahead of time, because then it just allows us to really have something to come back to. And yeah, that's kind of what I did on the other days of the challenge. So when I did the day one, like I worked through this process. It was amazing. I did a number of pages of journaling, and one of the biggest things in my objections, and I've done this work before, so it's amazing that there were still objections to come up, but it was nobody cares what I have to say. But like I said, this is paired with the fact that I'm putting this out into the world and sharing my progress for other people to potentially judge. And that is really hard, scary prospect. And like I've said before, like it's just hard baked into our brains to be part of the group, to be accepted and not be rejected, because at one point in time, rejection from the group would lead to almost certain death. So bit of a bummer. Right? Not the same now. I mean, our society functions in a way where if you kind of need to, you can pretty much get through things on your own, although really we are social animals. Support systems help us. They help us to be less depressed, to have less of those things in a lot of ways. So yeah, working through the nobody cares what I have to say. That, and I'll talk a bit more about that, but let's get into day 2, right? The day 2, my goal was to connect with 5 strangers. So for me, what this looks like is going into Instagram and finding 5 people who I haven't seen their content before, I'm not already following, not already connected, and looking at their content, seeing if it is something that could either be awesome, either in a potential client or just a potential like colleague, referral, partner, that type of person, or somebody who could potentially be on the podcast or something one day. So there's a bit of a range there. And I guess, like, I know this whole measurable thing or whatever for the SMART goals, if you want to go back to that, I guess this is where I'm getting clear on, does it have to mean I have to DM 5 strangers straight away, or do I get to just play in the area of, hey, let's just comment on their posts and possibly hit follow? So that's kind of the area that I landed in. My person on my team, Gem, she is amazing. She is a gem. She does a lot more of that initial outreach and that kind of stuff. And for me, when I'm working for other businesses and doing it on their behalf, it's way easier. When you're doing it on your own behalf, it's really sort of putting yourself out there for sort of maximum potential rejection and fear. And that's what I'm going to be talking about on day 2, is like reframing some of that rejection and the fear and that sort of stuff. So I don't know, that's just where I started on day 2. I thought I could work up to it. I might have done one DM. I don't like it to be like, oh, I've got to DM 5 people, 5 new people. I mean, I can do that, but to me, that's where it gets into this kind of icky feeling for me, as opposed to, really genuinely creating a connection first. And that's how I felt about it. I thought the DMs can come later in the week. On day 2, for me, I was really anxious before I started, okay, especially because I was going to be sharing this online. And yeah, I really needed that 5-minute meditation to clear the nerves. So it's like, oh, I'm glad my plan is working. I've got my back. I have my 5-minute meditation. I had to read through the prep work in the journaling that I did. So read through the future journaling. I read through the objections that I had worked through ahead of time, the reframing work that I had done the day before. And I came on to 2 things that really helped me to take action. And that was, creating and building relationships is valuable. And I wonder who I'll meet today. Whenever it comes to building connections with strangers and even attending networking events, for me, it really helps to get into an area in my energy and brain of creativity and curiosity. And that comes from, I wonder who I'll meet today. So then it's like, oh, for me, I get to come from this place of, I'm searching for other people's stories, and I don't necessarily have to be something that I'm not in order to impress, in order to be better than I am, or anything like that. So yeah, that really helped. It also really helped for me to just have this nice, easy goal of 5 people, because the block in my stomach was like super hard concrete. I wasn't wanting to take action. And it was just nice to be able to give my brain evidence that I can do hard things and that I can actually take the action and things work out well. And I actually had a couple of people who commented back, who messaged me back. The fun part about this stuff is, when you get into the right energy, you end up connecting with other people who like doing this stuff. So then they'll make the first move and DM you. In a lot of cases, that's like, oh, cool, no worries. So yes, that was that. And just as a quick little aside, on day 2 that evening, I had date night with my husband. We went and saw the Barbie movie, which was a great way to decompress and de-stress. It was a nice little bonus celebration of me working on this stuff and actually sharing it with the world and putting the post out, which was awesome and definitely amusing and well worth a watch. So then day 3, okay, by day 3, this is where, just in some ways, the rubber meets the road on 2 levels. One, I need to reach out to 10 strangers, which is 5 more than yesterday, which really isn't that many in the scheme of things, right? Many people can do 10, 20, 50 something in a day, right? Bearing in mind, Instagram has limits on how many you can do in an hour and all that sort of stuff, right? So, and really, it's just weird how the brain's like, oh, that's twice as much as yesterday, but really in the scheme of things, it's not even that many. And then on the other hand, I had 2 really fully packed days where I had overscheduled myself, and I realized that I was just very exhausted. Because we went to the movie the night before, I stayed up even later than usual. I got to bed late, didn't sleep well, and so yeah, I know when I don't get a certain amount of sleep, taking action is even harder. So I had to take it easy. And it's so funny. If I hadn't been doing this challenge and putting out into the world and telling you guys about it on the podcast and all that sort of stuff, I might have been really tempted to just skip day 3 or just move it or shift it or something like that. But because I've been putting this out publicly, there was a part of me that was like, no, 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 you've made a commitment. And from my perspective, even if I had moved it, I wouldn't have been too upset because I like to honor my energy and my health. And for me, I have an identity as someone who I follow through 80% of the time, and I'm okay with that. And that makes it very easy for me to take action and to not be perfect. And that even if I skip a day, I know I'll absolutely pick it up the following day. Just because I do that in my health, I do that for other areas of my business. Sometimes I have to shift when the posts get done and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. But I had been putting it out there. I'd made a commitment to myself to share this, and I said I was going to be in the stories every day, and I really wanted to honor that commitment. So what I needed to do, because I was so exhausted and I hadn't had enough sleep and everything, I just started by lowering my expectations of like, hey, maybe I don't meet my goal, and maybe there is value in that for people. Because when you're working outside of your comfort zone, I'd imagine that while I'm doing this relatively, in some ways, simple task, and yet it's causing me a ton of anxiety, it is also like, these are the skills that we apply to doing bigger things, like launching podcasts, like being a guest on other people's podcasts, like doing launches and online events and masterclasses and things like that. We're still going through this thing. And if you are like me, where you understand this idea of, okay, I'm doing something brave, and then all of a sudden every muscle in your body tenses up, it's on your mind a lot, and despite all of the tools and working through them, it still hasn't all cleared and everything. And I know that there's like other tools out there that would probably help me clear them, but I don't have them at my disposal right now. So yeah, I'm just working with what I have and taking action. And yeah, so and this is something of helping the brain to learn that we can take action, and busting through these blocks and helping the brain to learn that actually we can take action without maybe that hardcore, concrete block in the stomach, walking through mud response too. And yeah, so for me, I had to lower the expectations. And so what my plan was, okay, let's just set a timer for 15 minutes and I'll do what I can in 15 minutes. And in that 15 minutes, I did 7 connections. And this is what I mean by genuine connections with people, okay? There's genuine connections. This is me taking the time to actually genuinely read somebody's post, to get a handle on who they are, what they're about, and yeah, read a couple of their posts, try and interact, write a comment, that kind of thing. In the 15 minutes, I got through 7 of my 10 strangers, and then it was like, okay, well, I've done 7, I've only got to do 3 more. So then it was just easy enough to then go, okay, let's set a timer for another 5 minutes and get the other 3 connections. And I'm so excited that I did that, because at that point, my brain, like all of the fear just melted, right? And I gave my brain evidence that actually I can do this. It doesn't have to take long, and that I can do hard things even when I'm exhausted. One of the things I'm still working on, I I manage chronic illness. So being able to do these things in a way where I can support my health is really, 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 really essential. The other things that I did on day 3 was there were other tasks on my calendar, right? My to-do list fits into my calendar. I moved them to the following day. I let my team know certain things weren't going to be happening until the next day. And I just, released a lot of that pressure, which really helps me on days like that. Sometimes when it comes to chronic pain or something like that, even if I've had a well-rested night, I can still have a low energy day. So having that spaciousness and the ability to move things to the following day, having buffer time in my schedule is essential. And I'm so glad that I have it. Although it's getting more and more challenging as my business is growing. So yeah, day 4, then after day 3's breakthrough, right? Day 4 then became easy street, right? I woke up, I was like, yeah, cool, I can definitely do 15 because I did 10 when I was exhausted yesterday and it went easy. So I can totally do 15. And I didn't even have to start with my meditation or journaling and getting into the zone. I was just able to jump in at the time that I needed to and then just start doing it. And I guess the other thing you should know is that I had a full night's sleep and was well rested, so that definitely helps. And it's kind of essential when you are doing brave things and working outside of your comfort zone in your business, right? Even on things that can be relatively small and for other people seem relatively small. So yeah, I did, it's so funny. I did the 15 people connection in 20 minutes, and I probably messaged a couple of them as well, right? And yeah, didn't feel anxious, didn't need to meditate or journal, and just got started. It was easy. My brain had evidence that it was easy, so it was awesome. Now, today is actually day 5 as I'm recording this episode, and the goal is 20 people. And I have once again not had as much sleep. I've definitely got to keep a handle on that. My brain had thoughts of, okay, hang on, I know we've been reaching out to people, we should really nurture all these other people that we had connections with, or we should do the DMs and things like that. And it's like, no, we're not going to do nurturing, can come next week. That's the plan. This week, the focus is reaching out to these new people in a genuine way. And yeah, so far I've done 15 minutes. I did get a little distracted by DMs because people have been messaging me back. I'm going to be splitting it up throughout the day, which was not my original plan, but that is just how the day is working out. And yeah, I've connected with 3 or 4 new people, and it's just interesting. It's just not coming as easily. And I don't know if that's just an effect of my energy on Fridays is always a little bit less. And so that's why I'm thinking about changing my goals to maybe doing 5, 10, 15, and then back down to 10 or something. And it's sort of an interesting thing to know about me is like, yeah, I guess a bit like the 4 seasons or something. Like not like it's like being able to rise up to something and then have some time to just come back down and just do a little bit less. And I think that's something that I'm learning about myself as kind of a cycle that I quite enjoy, of like go, 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 and then just pull back and just, it's like you leap off the cliff, and then like say you're on a hang glider thing and you get to just float down and it gets to be easy. You're still doing things, but you're not necessarily reaching for the stars at that point. And I mean, that's how I feel today. That's how I feel this week. And maybe at a different time in my life, I'll have a completely different approach to that. But that's how my challenge has worked. All right, so far. And yeah, it's been an eye opener into who I am and the stuff that I'm going through. And that's part of why I love bravery as well. It just really gets us to learn more and more about ourselves. So yeah, my alarm just went off to let me know that I need to not keep talking for too much longer. But I'm just going to give you a bit of a recap on not a recap on what I've done, but just at the time that this episode goes live, I will be starting the actual teaching of the challenge for the following week. As I said, I'm going to be starting July 31, 8 p.m. US Eastern Standard Time over on Instagram. I'll be going live. You can catch me live or on replay. And I'll be going live at that same time for 5 days, right? That also aligns with August the 1st at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So I'll be going live for the 5 days, and I'll be finishing off on Saturday in Sydney, Australia time. So just working through this challenge, and I'm going to be doing the things like we're going to be setting the Brave goal together, walking you through that whole process, and just be there for any questions that you have, and how do I apply it to this, or how do I apply it to that? Okay. Day 2, I'm going to be talking about handling fear, resistance, and other blocks, because that's probably the day that you're really going to start needing to handle that. Okay. And then day 3, it's going to be talking about handling no, and how no can be a good thing and how no holds us back, right? Because if you are having problems doing this outreach, you may be seeing this problem also echo in your ability to get new clients and things like that too. Because if you're worried about rejection and hearing no, then that could certainly come into you getting clients, right? Then day 4, we get into turning relationships into sales without feeling icky, okay? And the whole idea of that is like, this challenge is just to get you started, but day 4 is, okay, maybe starting to help us have a plan on how we can turn this into clients and sales. And yeah, but the idea is not to start selling people during the 5-day challenge, okay? Unless you want to, if that's who you are and that's how you feel good and aligned, then absolutely. But yeah, that's not necessarily what I'm advocating, but it's just sort of like, okay, here's some plans for the future. And then on day 5, it's like, okay, we're going to plan our next move. So we're going to celebrate, okay? And that's actually something I should have done at the beginning of this podcast, is celebrate that I have made connections with 10, 15, it's like 30 people, 30 new people. So celebrating, reviewing and looking at our lessons learned, okay? And like my lessons learned about, okay, I might change my goals for next week's challenge. So yeah, and then planning out our next step to then nurture these connections and turn them into clients is part of what we'll be doing on day 5. And for anybody who is taking action and following this challenge, if you send me through a screenshot of you taking action, then you can also get access to a free 30-minute coaching call with me. So we can either work through a block, tailor this to you, reframe something, or just help you come up with that plan on how to turn these connections into sales for you. So yeah, definitely come over, get in touch with me over on IG. I am at Tiffany G Studios, Tiffany, G for golf, Studios. And, DM me. You can get a link to the Facebook event thing, which has more information and this stuff written out if you want, or you can just keep an eye out on my feed to join me for the first live video, either going live or or on replay. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys over there. Like I said, this has really changed my business. Like, I recorded an amazing podcast with someone last night, and just, like, we're getting to know each other, and it's just so inspirational doing this stuff, and being able to connect with people and invite them onto the podcast has absolutely helped. Not that you can't do this without that. I mean, the podcast was the thing that helped me to have something to center this around. if I had been a different person, maybe a braver person before I started the podcast, I might have actually been inviting people onto coffee chats and doing that stuff beforehand. I just would often get into this phase of just, being really great at this, like on again, off again, which I know doesn't sound great, but it's like I'd be really great at this. It would create clients, and then I'd get really busy with the clients and this stuff would drop off. And I know that that can be a common thing for people. That's part of why I have someone on my team to help me with this, so that it doesn't, like, if I drop off when I get busy, I know I've got someone doing the minimum for me and keeping it moving. And she does an amazing job. And if anybody wants a recommendation, then let me know, because I can give you her details. So yeah, it's just, this is what I do. This is what I love doing. And it's just, I've created friends. I've created accountability partners. I have the podcast. I've filled out the podcast slots. I've had collaborations. I've had referrals through doing this kind of work. And my income has increased in the last couple of months as well, just through having this network. Like, I remember as a kid, they'd talk to you. It's like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I would immediately follow that up with, well, that's great for the outgoing people of the world. I didn't even have terminology like introvert and extrovert at that point in time. It's like, oh, well, that's great for other people, but I'm not great at that. So I'm going to have to find another way around that. And for me and my personality, though, what I have found through doing this work is I get really lit up by having conversations with people and just hearing about what they have going on, and seeing their content, but also kind of getting to know them a little bit beyond the content as well. And the same with just connecting with people on the podcast and all that stuff just really lights me up and helps me to make taking action easier, and for me to actually have this sense of purpose and connection with what I'm doing, and the passion and that kind of stuff, which I didn't even know was something that I was missing until then I started working on this stuff. And it's like, oh, hang on. Yeah, this is a whole new ball game, especially with all the other tools that I've worked in for working through my self-doubt and being able to trust myself and not worry about saying the wrong thing and that kind of stuff. And that's some of the stuff that I'll be talking about in next week's challenge. Okay. So again, live on IG at Tiffany G Studios, and it's going to be July 31, 8 p.m. US Eastern Standard Time, and that is 1st of August at 10 a.m. Australian. Hang on. Excuse me. July 31, 8 p.m. US Eastern, and then August 1st, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. There we go. That's when I'll be going live. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have been vibing with this, if you have your own experiences, I 100% encourage you to come over. You can DM me. You can DM me as part of the challenge next week. Let me know your thoughts, feedback, and if you have had experiences like this, and what is it that holds you back from creating these relationships, and why are the relationships valuable to you? Thank you so much for listening. That's it from me. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Business Bravery podcast. Has this episode inspired you to do something brave? Even if it's only send a difficult email, please share it with me on Instagram or other social media channels. Feel free to tag me at Tiffany G Studios. That's TIFFANY. G for golf, STUDIOS, no spaces, no underscores, etc. Or you can use the hashtag Business Bravery podcast so that I can cheer you on, and together we can inspire other coaches and course creators to do brave things in their business and life. Now, I'm Tiffany, and I'll leave you with this one last thing. What's one brave thing you're going to do today? It doesn't have to be big. Even the smallest steps can create the most massive results. So again, feel free to share it with me either publicly or privately so that I can cheer you on. That's it from me. Until next time, bye for now.